The first video I see when I wake up this morning is a video of a military serviceman talking about how active by the way, talking about how someone made a request for $50,000 for an emergency paint job, and he's like, "I'm gonna tell you two things," and that was one of them. And I'm not, for legal reasons, I can't tell you an opinion, but you can formulate your own opinion, and then you said it, not me. So the second thing he says is, I've been in the military for like 20 years, and I have been in positions where there's no HVAC, 87 degrees. We put in requests for help. When it finally comes, if it ever comes, it's a Band-Aid and it's broken again next week. I go through the comments and there's like, yeah, same. I lived in black mold, breathing in black mold for 5 years, and my whole family is sick now. I know that there's a lot of food insecurity on military bases, for example, and that we treat veterans like shit. So the next video I see is Generational News, and he's telling me that the person who made that apparently it was an emergency request, the person who made that emergency request for $50,000 for a paint job was Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense. In order to move into military housing, he needs an emergency $50,000 for paint. Either they're sticking him in a mansion, which I imagine was not abused or treated poorly, so I feel like the paint's probably okay, or he's getting 24 karat gold paint. Either way seems wasteful to me. Either way seems like the princess treatment to me. Because if you are a military guy, I feel like you'd be able to fucking rough it with some paint that was there before you. I personally would probably want a fresh paint job moving into a place, but as a public servant, when does the servant part come in? Anyway, as most of you probably know, before this gig as the Secretary of Defense, he was a host on Fox and Friends Weekend. I guess at some point in his life, he was in the National Guard. And if you look up his bio, he was a part of veteran advocacy groups, is what they call it. What exactly was he advocating for? Sounds very vague to me. Sounds like something that's supposed to make him seem like he gives a shit about veterans when he doesn't. I'm sorry, I just don't see a leader moving in and being like, I'm better than you, because that's what it reads like to me. You guys can eat shit. The people beneath me can eat shit. I need an emergency $50,000 for paint. I know personally, allegedly, because I purport to have been a military serviceman. I'm not saying he's lying. I'm sure it's verifiable, right? But what I'm saying is, if you purport to have been a military serviceman yourself, and then you think it's appropriate to ask for an emergency $50,000 for paint, that doesn't just seem egregious or fucking like out of touch. It sounds like you want the princess treatment because now you think that you're a king, because you have to know what the plight of the people beneath you is. And if you don't care about their plight, in the face of their plight, you're going to ask for an emergency $50,000 when you know that there's food insecurity on your military bases. You're going to ask for an emergency $50,000 for paint. You think you're a fucking king. And if anyone is okay with it and says, well, his rank, he's the Secretary of Defense, he deserves it, then you also think he's a king. Tell me more about the kingdom of this democracy. Hierarchical structures that you buy into are very fucking dangerous, because you will let people get away with fucking anything because they're above you, based on nothing more, in this instance at least, nothing more than luck and circumstance. You really think that there was merit involved in this? I don't care. I'm not going to get involved in that discussion because I don't care. It's always like this. But the problem is when we co-sign it, when we ignore it and then co-sign it by ignoring it, when we defend it. If you defend that sort of wasteful spending from a guy that's a part of the administration that is allegedly going after government waste, tell me how $50,000 for an emergency paint job isn't government waste. You might find it interesting to know that every time a new president takes his seat, he gets hundreds of thousands of dollars at his disposal to redecorate, because they can't possibly live in last year's fucking furniture. Every time one of your lawmakers takes their seats, they also get a budget to redecorate their offices. It's an office. It's an office. All these government agencies get money for furniture that they renew, they redecorate, they get new furniture, even if it's just replacing it with the same fucking furniture, because they got to spend it, because then they won't get that budget next year if they don't spend it. Riddle me this. What the fuck happens if they don't spend it? What if you just have the same fucking furniture for 5 years? That's our money. I need you to understand that that is our money. And they continue to spend it when they don't need to spend it so that they can get it again next year. And then they go right to the fucking limit so that they can say, well, you know, we spent this much last year, so we're going to need this much more this year because the cost of everything goes up. But you can eat shit. Anyone below them can eat shit. How many times have you seen these lawmakers when they're justifying voting for their own fucking raises, talking about how they can't live with anything less than that? And then people do these like deep dives to find out what the average median salary or income, household income of one of their constituents is, and it's like a 20th of their salary. You co-sign this by looking the other way when someone asks for $50,000 for an emergency paint job. Do you know what happens when you call it an emergency? They don't ask you to get other bids. They don't ask questions. They don't scrutinize an invoice. Well, he said it was an emergency. I'm sure there was mold or something. They didn't ask for $50,000 for fucking emergency remediation of mold. It's for fucking paint. And if you're okay with it by virtue of the fact that he's the Secretary of State, then you believe in kings and you're okay with your own subjugation. It's a slippery slope and a dangerous one. If you can justify that, you're a person who punches down and you're okay with other people punching down. You cheer on people punching down because they're in that position. They deserve it. It's okay if they stomp on the people before them. It's okay if they're moving on to a military base where there is fucking food insecurity and they're asking for $50,000 for a fucking paint job. Your money. It's your money.